The night was cold and quiet in a small town near the forest where Ryan lived alone in a wooden house far from the city with no family around and no neighbors nearby. He liked silence and he liked stars. He often sat outside with a telescope watching with sky and thinking about his past as an engineer for space missions. He had left that life many years ago after a bad accident in space. He now fixed machines for local people and lived a simple life. One night while Ryan was making tea, he heard a loud sound from the sky. It was not a plane and not thunder. It was something else, something strange. He looked outside and saw a bright light falling fast from the sky. It looked like a fireball, but it made no sound. It crashed deep inside the forest behind his house. Trees shook, birds flew away, and the light disappeared. Ryan grabbed his coat and flashlight and ran into the woods to see what it was. He reached the spot. He saw smoke and broken trees. Something had landed there, but not a rock. It was a small pod shining with a blue light and humming softly. He walked closer and touched it. The pod opened slowly, and inside was a child. A small girl no more than 6 years old. She had big glowing eyes and strange marks on her arms, like small lines that shined in the dark. She looked scared and weak. She did not speak. She only looked at Ryan with fear and hope. Ryan was shocked, but his heart felt something he had never felt before. He saw pain in her eyes. He saw that she was alone, lost and helpless. He picked her up carefully and took her home. The pod closed behind him as if it knew she was safe now at home. Ryan wrapped her in a blanket and gave her warm milk. She did not speak, but she drank slowly and watched him with big eyes. She looked human but also different. Her skin was soft, but her hands had 6 fingers. Her eyes were deep blue but had stars in them. Ryan sat beside her and said, "Everything is okay. You are safe now." She looked at him and slowly closed her eyes and slept. Next morning, Ryan woke up early and checked the news. No one had reported the crash. The forest was far and no one lived near. Maybe no one saw it. Maybe no one knew. He looked at the girl who was now awake and walking around the room. She touched things with wonder. She looked at a clock and smiled, then looked at a plant and touched it gently. The leaves moved slightly like they felt her touch. Ryan asked her, "What is your name?" but she said nothing. Instead, she pointed to herself and then to the stars on a book cover. Ryan understood she came from the sky. He named her Leia. It was short and sweet. She smiled when he said it again and again as if she liked it. From that day, Leia became a part of his life. She stayed in the house, and Ryan taught her how to speak, how to eat, and how to use things. She was smart, very smart. She learned fast and always looked at the sky with longing. One night while Leia was asleep, Ryan heard her speak in a strange voice, not loud but clear. She said, "They're coming," again and again. Ryan sat beside her and held her hand. He did not know what it meant, but he felt fear in her voice. He looked outside and saw the sky was clear, full of stars and silence, but something inside him changed. He knew this was not just a lost child. She was something more, something from another world, and maybe the world was not far. Maybe it was watching. Maybe it wanted her back. The next few days, Ryan noticed strange things. Leia could move small objects without touching them. She could heal a small cut on her hand in seconds. Her eyes would glow when she was happy or afraid. One day a bird hit the window and fell. Leia ran to it and placed her hands on it. In moments the bird flew away healthy and strong. Ryan kept all this a secret. He told no one. He said she was his niece from far away. When people asked, he stopped working and spent more time at home teaching Leia and keeping her safe. He knew the world would not understand her and maybe would not accept her. One evening while walking in the forest again, Leia pointed to the sky and said in a soft voice, "Home." Ryan looked at her and said, "This is your home now." She smiled and hugged him. He felt warmth in his heart, something he had not felt in years, but deep inside he knew this peace would not last forever. He knew someone somewhere might be looking for her, maybe others from her world, maybe enemies, maybe family, and one day they might come to take her back. And when that day comes, Ryan knew he would do anything to protect her, because she was no longer a stranger, no longer just an alien child. She was his daughter now. Morning came with soft light falling on the window as Leia sat near the couch with a book in her hand, turning pages slowly with wide eyes full of wonder, while Ryan made breakfast in the kitchen, watching her with a warm smile on his tired face, because something inside him felt alive again after so many quiet years with no one to talk to and no one to care for. The house felt different now, filled with small sounds of footsteps and laughter and sometimes soft humming in a language Ryan could not understand but found calming, like a song from the stars that floated around the air without music but full of peace and magic. And when Leia touched the walls, the lights flickered as if they were greeting her gently, like old friends from another time. Ryan tried teaching her human things like how to hold a spoon, how to write simple words, and how to watch cartoons, which she loved and laughed at without even knowing all the jokes. And sometimes she would try to copy what she saw on screen, making silly faces and sounds that made Ryan laugh for the first time in many months. And when she smiled back, it was like sunlight in the middle of night. Each day she learned fast, much faster than any normal child, and Ryan knew she was special beyond anything he could imagine, not only because of her powers but because of how she looked at the world with eyes full of curiosity and kindness, and how she touched flowers as if she could hear them whisper, and how animals near the forest came close without fear, as if drawn by some invisible bond that connected her with all living things. One afternoon, Leia sat near the small garden and placed her hands on the soil and closed her eyes, and Ryan watched as tiny plants began to grow from the earth, reaching for her fingers like green hands trying to hold her, and he said in a quiet voice, "You are a miracle." And she opened her eyes and looked at him with love without speaking. Later, Ryan decided to try sending her to school, thinking maybe she could make friends and learn more like other kids. But when they reached the school and the teacher saw her strange glowing eyes and her soft marks like silver lines on her arms, she stepped back with fear and said, "This child is not normal." And parents complained and children stared and pointed and whispered words that felt sharp like knives, and Ryan took her hand and walked away with pain in his chest. Back at home, Ryan sat with her and said, "I will teach you myself and you will never be alone." And she placed her hand on his and said one word slowly, "Father," and he felt tears rise in his eyes. Not from sadness but from something deeper, like finding a lost part of himself in this child from the stars, who now called him father with truth and love in her voice. Days turned into weeks and Leia made the house her own, drawing pictures of stars and moons and strange worlds with glowing rivers and flying cities, and Ryan kept them all on the walls like art from another universe, and each picture had a story which she told in broken English and soft alien sounds that made Ryan wonder what her home looked like and who had sent her here and why. One night, while they sat near the fire with the sound of wind outside, Leia suddenly touched her head and closed her eyes and began to whisper words in a language Ryan had never heard before, and her body started to glow, slowly changing colors like the sky during sunset. And then she said, "Clearly they are coming," and Ryan leaned forward and asked who, and she said, "Home." People then paused and added, "Maybe not safe." After that night, Leia became quiet for a few days, looking at the sky for hours, holding a small crystal that had fallen from her pod, which Ryan had hidden deep in the forest under stones and leaves so no one would find it. But now she carried the crystal again and held it close to her chest like a memory or a messagery, and began to prepare without knowing what was coming, building secret spaces in the basement, adding locks and cameras, and trying to contact his old friend from the space program named Marcus, who now worked in satellite control, hoping he could find out if something strange was moving in space near Earth. And when Marcus finally replied, he said, "Something big is out there, and it is." Watching, Ryan told Leia, "We will be ready," and she smiled and nodded, and then raised her hand and made the lights dance in circles around them like stars in a small room, and for a moment everything felt safe again, like they were inside their own little world where nothing could break in. But deep inside, Ryan knew that peace was only a small island in a big sea, and something dark was coming from the stars, something that might take her away, unless he was strong enough to protect her, not just with walls and cameras but with love and courage and the promise he had made to her the day he found her alone in the forest. "You are mine now, and I will never let you go." The sky was darker than usual and the stars looked distant and cold, as if hiding something behind their light, while Ryan sat alone in his garage fixing an old radio for a neighbor who never really came but always gave him things to fix, so he would stay busy and not think too much about the past or the future. But tonight his hands were slow and his mind was full of questions that had no answers. Leia was inside, drawing again with colors that shimmered like glass in sunlight, creating shapes that Ryan had never seen before, shapes that looked like maps or machines or maybe memories from a place far beyond the clouds. And every time she finished one, she would look at it for a long time, then fold it and hide it under her bed like a secret she could not share. Yet Ryan kept hearing a strange sound from the radio, a soft beep repeating again and again with no signal or message attached, and it made his skin feel cold, like something or someone was trying to speak but did not know how to reach him. So he wrote down the pattern and sent it to Marcus, his old friend from the space station, who still owed him a favor from years ago. That night, while Leia slept with her glowing crystal under her pillow, Ryan sat outside with a blanket and a cup of tea, looking up at the sky and trying to guess which star had sent her, and if it was shining brighter because it missed her or darker because it was afraid of something following her. The next day, Marcus called and his voice was not calm. His voice was shaking as he said, "Where did you hear that signal?" Ryan asked, "Why, what does it mean?" And Marcus said, "It is not just noise. It is a lock code, a kind of beacon used by ancient space travelers to mark lost cargo or life. And the last time we saw it was 20 years ago, near a planet that no longer exists." Ryan felt his heart beat faster and asked, "Does anyone else know?" Marcus said, "Not yet, but they will soon. The signal is growing stronger and moving faster across channels, and that means someone or something is responding to it, or tracking it, or both." Later that evening, Leia sat quietly near the fireplace and held a new drawing in her hand, and Ryan saw it was a star map with red lines connecting points in space, forming a path that ended with a symbol he had seen before on the side of her crashed pod. And when he asked her what it meant, she looked into his eyes and said home was lost. Now others searched for Myri and did not sleep. That night he checked the forest again, looked at the hidden pod, touched a cold metal and felt it vibrate slightly, like it was waking up and calling back to whoever had built it, and maybe calling to others who wanted it for reasons Ryan could not guess. In the morning, Ryan got a strange feeling and walked outside, where he saw footprints near the trees. Not animal prints, but long narrow shapes with 3 toes, like something not from Earth had walked near his home and watched silently from the shadows, then left. without sound or trace, but left a warning in the ground. He covered the prints quickly and told Lia to stay inside and lock the doors, and she nodded without fear, only calm, as if she already knew. They were being watched and had known for many days, but did not want to scare him until it became real. Marcus called again and said a satellite picked up a ship moving near Earth's orbit, not big, not armed, but cloaked and old, like something from a forgotten time, and Ryan asked, is it here for her? And Marcus said, I do not know, but it sent the same signal she drew last week on your Warrior. Felt a storm inside his chest, not of fear but of questions and choices, and the one thought that kept rising was, how far will I go to keep her safe, and how long until someone stronger comes knocking on my door with answers and weapons and orders to take her away? That evening the lights flickered again and the crystal near Leah's bed began to glow without her touch, floating in the air and spinning, slowly then dropping as if tired and cold, and Leah picked it up and said, they are near. They do not want to hurt, but they do not trust. And Ryan asked, do you trust them? And she said, I trust your rain. Began to fall outside, soft and slow, as Ryan closed every window and checked every camera, then sat with Lia and held her hand and told her, if anyone comes, I will stand in front of you, and if they ask who you are, I will say you are my daughter, and I will mean every word. The fire crackled and the drawings on the walls seemed to shift in the light, as if telling their own story without voice and without fear. And somewhere far above the clouds a small ship waited in silence, its lights blinking once, then twice, then stopping. Ryan looked at the sky and whispered, I am not afraid, but I am ready. Clouds moved slowly over the hills and the sky turned silver with a soft wind that carried no sound, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to arrive, something old, something forgotten. And as Ryan walked through the garden with Leah by his side, he felt the ground whisper under his feet like a voice from the past trying to speak without words or form. The forest was quiet, too quiet for spring. No birds, no rustling leaves, no distant howls, only stillness wrapped in silence like a blanket over time. And Lia looked at the trees with wide eyes full of knowing, as if she heard things Ryan could not, and saw shapes that stayed hidden from human sight that night while the stars blinked above like watchers in the sky. A bright light appeared behind the trees, not falling, not rising, only waiting like a candle in the dark, and Ryan stood at the window holding a tool in one hand and a blanket in the other, not knowing which one he would need first. Ye walked toward the door with slow steps, not afraid, not surprised, only calm and quiet, like someone who has waited too long and now sees the end of waiting. And as she opened the door, a soft hum filled the air, a sound not made by any machine on earth, not loud, not sharp, only deep and smooth like wind underwater. From the trees came a figure, tall and thin, wrapped in silver light that moved like water on skin. Her eyes glowed like twin moons and her hair floated without wind. Her feet did not touch the ground, and yet she stepped forward like a mother returning home after years of searching with only one hope left. Ryan stepped in front of Lia with a firm voice and said, who are you, and what do you want? And the figure stopped and spoke without moving her mouth. Her voice entered the air like music and said, I am her mother. I have crossed stars to find her, and now I ask to bring her home. Lia said nothing. She only looked at the figure with wide eyes and a trembling lip, and then ran into her arms without fear, without pause, without question, as if a part of her heart had returned and filled the space that no words could ever reach. Ryan stood still, not angry, not afraid, just quiet, as if the world who had changed shape and he was trying to hold it together with his breath and his thoughts. The figure held Lia close and looked at Ryan and said, thank you for keeping her safe. She knows love because of you, and I will not forget. They sat together in silence for hours, not speaking, not moving, only breathing in the new truth that stood between them. And when morning came, the figure still stood in the garden, her feet now touching the earth, her glow dimmer, her voice warmer, and she said, I will not take her against her will. She must choose, and her choice will be final. Lia walked to Ryan and held his hand, then turned to the figure and said, I want to stay here. This is my home now. I belong with him. And the figure nodded with eyes that held galaxies and said, then I will stay too, because I cannot leave her again. Not now, not ever. Ryan said, how will you live here? What will people say? How will we hide you? And she touched a small crystal on her wrist, and her form shifted. Light bent around her, and she became human in shape, with soft brown eyes and dark hair and a voice that now held a small laugh. She said, I will learn, I will work, I will cook, I will burn the food, and you will teach me again. Leia laughed for the first time in days, and Ryan shook his head with a smile that tried to hide his fear, because he knew this peace was not real, not yet, not safe. Not while ships watched from above and signals danced through space like hunters in the dark, but for now they were together. Under one roof, one child, two parents, one secret that no wall could protect forever. And as the sun rose behind the trees and touched their faces with gold, Ryan whispered to himself, this house just became a family, and this world just became a little bigger. That night, the lights in the sky blinked again, and a shadow moved across the stars, unseen by most, but not by the mother, who looked up with a long breath and said, they have found us. They are not kind, and they do not forget. Ryan heard her words and held Lia close while the house stood quiet around them, holding hope and fear in equal parts. As the wind outside picked up speed and the forests began to whisper again, this time louder, this time closer, this time ready. Morning light touched the windows with soft fingers, and the smell of burned toast filled the small kitchen while Ryan stood near the stove trying not to laugh as the alien mother, now called Myra, held a smoking pan with a confused look on her face and asked, "Is it supposed to turn black like this?" And Ryan said, "Only if you want to scare the food away forever." Sat at the table giggling with her hands folded under her chin, watching both of them like a director behind a camera filming the first scene of a strange comedy show where an ex-space engineer, a glowing alien child, and her galactic mother tried to live a normal life. With no guide, no script, and no idea what would happen next, Mira moved through the house like someone learning to walk again, bumping into chairs, opening cupboards upside down, mixing salt in the tea and sugar in the soup. But each time she made a mistake, she laughed, not with shame but with joy, as if every new moment was a gift she thought she had lost long ago, and began to see her not as a threat, not as a stranger, but as someone trying, someone changing, someone carrying an ocean of sadness behind those quiet eyes, yet still brave enough to stand in the middle of a human kitchen and ask, "What does a dishwasher do, and why does it smell like old socks?" Leah grew happier each day, drawing new pictures on the walls, now with 3 figures instead of 2, and one of them always had stars in her hair and light in her hands, and the house slowly became something more than a hiding place. It became a home outside the world, stayed unaware neighbors, still distant news, still boring and peaceful, but above them in the sky beyond what eyes could see, something else was moving, something slow and silent and cold, like a shadow made of metal and secrets, and it watched without blinking, without resting, without mercy. Ryan checked the cameras more often now, not because he was scared, but because he had learned that peace was not forever, and silence sometimes meant a storm waiting to land, and he began building stronger locks, deeper tunnels, and hidden switches in the walls, just in case, just to be ready, just to protect what had become his family. Myra offered help and used her old tech to make small shields for the windows and trackers for the forest path, and she taught Ryan how to listen for energy pulses and read signals that traveled faster than sound through the soil and air. And he realized she was more than just a mother. She was once a leader, a protector, a warrior who had given everything to save her child and now stood ready to give more. One evening a bird flew into the window and dropped to the ground, wings shaking, eyes wide, and Ryan ran outside to help. But before he could touch it, a tall figure stepped from the trees with dark armor and no face, and picked up the bird and placed it gently in Ryan's hands, and then vanished like smoke in sunlight. Ryan froze, heart pounding, and ran back inside, and told Myra, and she did not speak for a long time, only sat on the floor holding Leia with both arms and whispered, "They are here," she told Ryan about the bounty hunters, creatures built from dead stars and forgotten wars who follow ancient codes and sell lives like gold, and one of them had marked Leia as a target, not for capture, not for rescue, but for removal, because inside her was something old, something powerful, something that could unlock a lost force buried in space long before humans learned to fly. Ryan asked, "What is it?" And Mira said, "Not even. I know fully only that she carries light in her blood and memory in her soul, and many would kill to hold it, or destroy it before it falls into the wrong hands." That night, the crystal under Leah's bed began to glow again, not with warmth but with warning, and strange symbols rose into the air and circled her like ghosts speaking in a voice no one understood, but everyone felt deep in the bones like thunder. With no sound, Myra touched the symbols and they vanished, and she said, "The bounty hunter is near and will not stop until one of us is gone." And Ryan said, "Then let him try, because I have something he does not." And when Mira asked what that is, Ryan looked at Leah and said, "Something worth fighting for." Next day Mira did not burn the toast, and Ryan only smiled once, but it was the kind of smile that said, "I am ready." And Leia stood between them, drawing again with her small fingers, moving fast across the paper, and this time her picture showed not fear, not war, not stars falling, but 3 figures standing in front of a house, while a shadow watched from far, and the words under it said, "We are not afraid." The sky turned dark before the sun could finish its climb, and the wind carried a strange smell like metal and ash, while Ryan checked the tools he had hidden in the basement, and Mira stood by the window scanning the forest with eyes that no longer blinked, and Leia sat in silence holding the crystal that now pulsed like a slow heartbeat, trying to say something no one could hear. The house felt different, like the walls were listening and the floor was waiting, and every corner was filled with questions that had no names, and Ryan knew the time for peace was fading like smoke in rain, and soon the truth would arrive, not with words but with fire and footsteps. Mira looked at Leia and said, "Something is waking inside. You and I cannot stop it, and I do not fully understand it, because you were born not just from me but from something older, something that chose you before I held you." And Ryan asked, "What does it mean?" And Mira said, "It means the hunters are not after you because you are rare or special. They are after you because you are the last piece of a broken map that leads to a forgotten force hidden before the stars had names." Ryan felt his hands shake, not from fear but from the weight of what she said, because now this was no longer about hiding or surviving. This was about protecting something that could change everything and maybe destroy everything. And he looked at Leia, who stared at the floor as if trying to hold back a storm that was already halfway through the door. Later that day, the forest went quiet again, and the animals ran from something that had no sound and no shadow, and Ryan saw a figure in the distance, not walking, not flying, just moving forward with a purpose that felt older than time, and he grabbed Mira's hand and said, "We need to tell her everything before they do." Inside the house, Mira sat with Laya and said, "You were not just lost when you came here, you were sent here. Not by accident, not by mistake, but by choice, and the ones who sent you are now gone, and the only key left is inside you, a key not made of metal or light, but memory and code hidden in your cells, waiting for the right moment to open something buried far beyond this world." Ryan asked what happens if they get her, and Mira said if they get her, the weapon will rise again, and the war that ended before Earth even formed will begin once more, and this time it will not stay in the sky. The ground began to shake slightly, not like an earthquake, but like something beneath the soil was stretching, and Ryan said, "What is happening?" And Myra said, "The hunter is near and he is not alone anymore." That night they moved to the underground shelter Ryan had built with Myra's help, and Laya sat in the middle while the walls lit up with soft blue lines like veins in stone, and she placed the crystal on the floor and it floated above the ground, spinning slowly, and Mira said, "She is unlocking something I never taught her," and Ryan said, "She is not a child anymore." The crystal burst into light and showed a map full of stars and black holes and hidden paths, and at the center was a name written in a language Ryan could not read, but Myra could, and her face turned pale and she said, "This is the core, this is where the last piece sleeps, and now every ship, every signal, every eye in space will turn toward this house." Laya looked at them and said, "I can feel it waking and I cannot stop it." And Ryan said, "You do not have to stop it, you just have to guide it." And Myra said, "No, she has to let it go, because if it stays inside her, it will burn her from within, and if it leaves her, it will call the war back from silence." The next morning the air felt heavy and the sky was full of clouds that did not move, and the sun was missing like it had hidden behind something afraid to shine, and Ryan saw new markings on Leah's arms, glowing gold, not blue, not red, but gold, like fire wrapped in peace. And Mira said, "She is changing, and this is the last stage before the power chooses what it becomes." They packed what they could and left the house, not as a family running from fear, but as protectors walking toward truth, and Ryan led the way with his old tools. Myra followed with her silent strength, and Laya walked in the middle holding the crystal that no longer pulsed because it had found its answer far above them in the cold black sky. The hunter moved through the dark with eyes that never closed and a mission that never ended, and behind him others followed, not for money, not for glory, but for the power that now walked in small feet through the forest. Ryan looked back once at the house and whispered goodbye, not to the walls or the roof, but to the life that had given him love and purpose, and then he turned forward and said, "Whatever comes, I will face it with you both." And Myra said, "We do not run, we stand." And Laya said, "I am ready." The forest was darker now, not because of the trees or the night, but because something above had spread like a curtain across the sky, hiding the stars and the moon and turning the earth below into a place where light had to fight for every inch, and where silence was no longer empty but full of pressure, like a breath being held too long. Ryan walked ahead with slow, careful steps, holding a scanner in one hand and a flashlight in the other, though neither was working now, and Mira walked behind him with her senses wide open, her eyes scanning the shadows, and her body tense like a soldier waiting for the signal that never comes. And Laya stayed between them, her crystal held tight against her chest, glowing not with fear but with a calm that made the air feel thinner and stronger at the same time. They reached the old cave deep in the cliffs where the trees stopped growing and the wind no longer came, and Myra said, "This is the place." The map showed this is where the core sleeps, and Ryan said, "What will it look like?" And she said, "It has no shape until it wakes." Laya stepped forward and the rocks around her began to hum softly, a sound not from earth, not from machine, but from memory, and the floor under her feet shifted like something below had recognized her and welcomed her back. And then the wall opened without touch, without force, just opened like it had been waiting for her and no one else inside. The cave was a chamber made of stone and light, with symbols carved in a language older than stars, and in the center stood a platform floating just above the ground, with no wires, no supports, only energy. And Mira said, "This is where she must stand. This is where the power will choose." Ryan held Leah's hand and said, "You do not have to do this," but she looked at him with soft eyes and said, "I do, because if I don't, they will never stop." And Myra said she was born for this, but she does not belong to this. She belongs to Yulia. Stepped onto the platform, and the light around her turned gold and white, and the walls began to move and whisper and shift as if remembering who they were and what they had once protected. And the crystal lifted from her hands and spun slowly in the air, then split into 3 pieces, each one floating around her like moons around a sun far above in the sky. The hunter ship arrived without sound, its body black and wide like a shadow with wings, and its eyes red and sharp like blades, searching for a target that had already found them first. And inside the ship were others, quiet and still, watching, waiting, preparing to descend. The ground shook once, then stopped, and a beam of light shot into the sky from the cave straight through the clouds, touching the belly of the hunter's ship like a finger pointing without fear. And Ryan said, "They know where we are." And Myra said, "Let them come, because the choice is hers now." Leah stood with her arms out, eyes closed, heart open, and the light around her grew brighter than any sun until it filled the whole chamber and reached out to Ryan and Mira and held them like a warm breath in winter. And then it spoke, not in sound but in feeling, in truth, in memory. It showed a war that had no heroes, only survivors, a weapon that had no mercy, only hunger, and a child chosen not by blood but by balance to carry what no machine could hold and no warrior could control, and it asked one question, not with words but with weight: do you keep this or do you destroy it? Laya looked at Ryan and saw every day he had protected her, every meal he had cooked, every story he had told, and then she looked at Myra and saw every night she had searched, every danger she had faced, every silent tear she had hidden, and then she looked at herself and saw not power, not fear, not destiny, only love. She reached out and touched the crystal pieces, and they shattered into light and vanished into the air. And the chamber dimmed, and the light faded, and the sky above cleared, and the hunter ship turned without warning and without sound, and left like a ghost that had lost its reason to stay there. Ground stopped shaking, and the air felt clean, and the cave closed behind them, sealing the truth forever. And Ryan said what happened, and Mira said she let it go. She chose peace, she chose family. They walked back through the forest with no sounds chasing them, no lights in the sky, no shadows on their backs, only the soft crunch of leaves and the quiet laughter of a child who had saved the world, not with power but with choice. Back at the house, Ryan opened the door and let them in, and Myra cooked again without burning anything, and Laya placed a new drawing on the wall showing 3 figures standing in sunlight holding hands and smiling, and above them were no ships, no stars, no war, only sky. Ryan sat on the couch and whispered to himself, she came from the stars, but this is her home now and always will be.